tell me, what sort of government do you believe Syria should have? Should it be Islamist or secular? Should it be democratic or more authoritarian?
Of course, when the Syrian people came out demanding freedom, and over the last 13 years, their demands have matured based on the history of Syria and what they have been experiencing, and the demands are for a democratic, pluralistic Syria with equal citizenship and political pluralism. But this, of course, the Syrian people are the ones who should decide that. They're the ones who should determine the kind of government, the kind of system that governs. I believe that the Syrian people want what they came out to demand 13 years ago.
So if I understand you correctly, there will be no requirement for women to wear the burqa or the hijab. They will be free to dress as they want, to wear what they want, to use makeup or cosmetics if they want, to keep their hair short or long or uncovered. They will be free to do what they want.
Until now, that's the case, and I think if there are any attempts to change that, I think we will see some resistance to implementing these kinds of actions. But we haven't seen anything yet. For now, we're looking at Damascus and Homs and Hama and Aleppo, and there haven't been any impositions of any of these rules.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. After the dramatic collapse of the Assad government, we interview a leader of the opposition coalition that swept to power. Are they surprised by their own startling success? What sort of government do they intend for Syria? What sort of relationship do they seek with the wider world? And how do they respond to the world's concerns about them? Those are some of the issues I shall put to the Vice President of the National Coalition for Opposition and Revolutionary Forces of Syria, Dima Moussa. Dima Moussa, in just over a week, Damascus has fallen and Assad has fled the country seeking sanctuary in Russia. Are you surprised both by what's happened and the speed with which events have unfolded?
First of all, thank you very much for hosting me and giving me this opportunity to talk about what's going on in Syria. And of course, for us, it's we are celebrating, and maybe people should understand why we're celebrating, because the Assad regime, whether Bashar al-Assad or his father before him, have been ruling Syria for over 50 years, and Syria has witnessed a lot of corruption and oppression over those 50 years. So this is, in a sense, it's not surprising. This was a long time coming. What might have been surprising, probably the speed at which this happened, starting with the military operation in less than 10 days. Because the Assad regime has been holding on to power since 2011, when the Syrian people took to the streets in peaceful demonstrations, demanding change and demanding freedom and dignity and some rights. And that was responded to with a lot of aggression and violence and increased detention of Syrians. We have been trying as political opposition to get Assad to the table for a peace process, for a smooth political transition, which he has refused to do for the past 13 years. So this sudden turn of events came as a surprise. We have been, though, expecting it. Because of the dire situation on the ground, there has been increased humanitarian suffering in a lot of areas in Syria, including those under the control of Assad, but also in the areas that are outside the control of Damascus, with some of the parts of Syria in the northwest, which were under the control of the opposition. Before 2011, there were less than 2 million people in that area. At this point, there were over 7 million. So you can imagine the humanitarian conditions in these areas.
Absolutely. Now, it seems, starting with Aleppo about 10 days ago, and then Homs, Hama, Damascus, the Assad army literally put down its weapons and melted away. They simply didn't fight. How do you explain that?
Well, over the last few years, the Assad regime has monopolized, has kidnapped the state, and this has weakened the state to the point that where we saw it collapsing basically as the opposition forces started advancing. The Assad army nearly put no fight as these forces were advancing, which makes sense because almost since 2015, in any kind of military operation, the Assad military was backed by Russian Air Force from above, from the shelling as the for the army to advance, and also by some of the Iranian militias that were on the ground. What we saw 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago when this military operation started, that there was no support that we had seen previously. And the army basically collapsed, had no, the morale was down. And this is, I think, one of the more important factors in what we saw over the last 2 weeks.
Tell me, how much support did Hayat Tahrir al-Sham receive from Turkey to enable the extraordinary speed with which it's taken over the country? And therefore, how much gratitude is owed to Ankara?
Well, actually, what we saw over the last 2 weeks, again, there was no support for either side of the Syrian sides, if we can say that, from the international supporters. So Turkey hasn't necessarily been supporting Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It has been supporting the armed factions that are affiliated with the official political opposition. And in this operation, they did not get involved either.
So there was no Turkish involvement on the side of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham at all?
There was none on either side. Like I said, the Russians and the Iranians did not contribute, did not support the Assad army and the factions. And actually, I should point out here that the groups that were advancing on the ground from the opposition side, there were other military factions affiliated with the opposition also involved in this operation, even though Hayat Tahrir al-Sham was the one that seemed to be leading this operation.
So the other factions united behind Tahrir al-Sham?
Well, this was basically most of the people that were contributing to this, because you have to keep in mind that these factions that were present in the area from which the operation started, these are young men who have either been displaced from their hometowns in other parts of Syria, or grew up seeing that their suffering is caused by the Assad regime. So yes, when they saw the military operation start, everybody joined in.
Let's talk a little about Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and its leader Abu Mohammed Al-Julani. What can you tell me about both of them?
Well, I think the history of the group is known. Of course, initially there was affiliation of it, but its predecessor, Al-Nusra Front, was affiliated with Al-Qaeda, but they broke that affiliation a few years ago. And then Hayat Tahrir al-Sham took basically was based in Idlib in northwestern Syria. And they governed that area. They had an executive branch that was governing that area in terms of the services and other executive matters. And we saw over the last few years also, based on their positions and what some international media was saying, that they were getting rid of any non-Syrian elements within their ranks. But in what we saw in this last operation is what was proven, that all of the people that were fighting within its ranks are Syrian young men.
Now, you mentioned yourself that the original basis on which the Tahrir was formed was the Al-Nusra organization, which was the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda. It was broken, they broke with Al-Qaeda in 2016. And I noticed that thereafter, the scholar Thomas Pierrett says that Abu Mohammed Al-Julani, he says, is a pragmatic radical who gives interviews to CNN and wears military fatigues rather than the traditional jihadist turban. Has he changed very considerably in his views, his manner and behavior over the last 5 to 10 years?
Well, I can't speak if he actually how much he has changed, but definitely the rhetoric has changed. And this was meant to make him present himself as just another Syrian opposition force, that they still carry some, I don't want to say radical, but maybe more conservative Islamic sort of ideals. And at the end of the day, this is the image that he presented of himself. There was some acceptance of him in the areas where he ruled, and that is mainly because they were able to offer certain services for the people that they hadn't had since the regime had left the area. Because when the regime left any area, they pulled all their services, and they stopped all the state institutions from working in those areas.
So it sounds as if you're suggesting he made a conscious, deliberate makeover to make himself and his image more acceptable to people.
Yes, this is what came across from the way that he was behaving, and the group was behaving and changing its behavior over the last few years.
Now, yesterday, reporting out of Damascus, Al Jazeera has reported that a transitional government, sometimes called a salvation government, will be formed under Mohammed Al-Bashir. What can you tell me about Mr. Mohammed Al-Bashir?
Mr. Mohammed Al-Bashir, he was the head of the Salvation Government, like you said, and this was the executive branch of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in governing Idlib. Of course, today they're not carrying the same name, because today this is a new phase, and this is a transitional government to ensure that there is a governing body during this period. We haven't seen enough yet to know which direction they're going to go. But until now, and of course, it's been only 2 days since Assad has left Syria, and basically there is this need and these demands by the Syrian people for the state not to collapse, for security and safety of the people to be ensured. So this is of the utmost priority. We also haven't seen yet exactly what the government is, because there are some of the former ministers they are still in Syria. We'll see if how much cooperation there will be, and in terms of the handover. But the main priority right now is to ensure that people get their basic services. There also is one main issue, and I really would like to take this opportunity to point it out, that we still have in Syria over 100,000 people missing, people who were detained and kidnapped by the Assad forces and some of its militias. And one of the main prisons in Syria, the Sednaya prison, which for a long time has had a very bad reputation, particularly in terms of imprisoning political prisoners, they still haven't found a lot of people who might be imprisoned there.
Now, according to the BBC, Mr. Jalali, the Syrian prime minister who did not flee the country, he's still in Damascus, has said that he will cooperate with the transitional government. He will ensure an effective, peaceful transition. Is he doing that?
So there was yesterday a meeting between him and Mr. Al-Bashir, and there seemed to be cooperation from Mr. Al-Jalali. And indeed, the first day when Assad had fled the country, he came out and he said, "I never left the country. I am here, continuing my work. I will ensure that whoever comes to to take over, we will transition. We will have a smooth transition." So until now, it seems that things are going that way. Of
Tell
course, we're
me
watching closely.
Tell me, what sort of government do you believe Syria should have? Should it be Islamist or secular? Should it be democratic or more authoritarian?
Of course, when the Syrian people came out demanding freedom, and over the last 13 years, their demands have matured based on the history of Syria and what they have been experiencing, and the demands are for a democratic, pluralistic Syria with equal citizenship and political pluralism. But this, of course, the Syrian people are the ones who should decide that. They're the ones who should determine the kind of government, the kind of system that governs. I believe that the Syrian people want what they came out to demand 13 years ago. And the next few days, I think we'll start seeing where things are going. And even though Assad has fled, there still needs to be a transition. We talked before about implementing Security Council Resolution 2254, which lays out the roadmap for the political solution. And this is still very much relevant because we still need all Syrians to sit at the table. And here I'm talking about representatives of the major political powers and political parties, mainly with the opposition, since before we only had one party in Syria, and they all need to sit together and decide what the transition should look like, the transitional governing body, what tasks it should shoulder, and come up also with a way to write a new constitution for Syria and then carry out free elections based on this new constitution. This is the vision that we've had for the last 13 years. This is what we promised the Syrian people, and we are hoping that we can still do that.
So you're saying to me that the Syrian people themselves need to sit together around a table and decide the character of the new government, whether it's the transitional government or the government that follows the transitional government, as well as the character of the constitution. And you believe it should be democratic and pluralist, which means all Syria's communities, Shia, Sunnis, Alawites, Druze, Christians, will all have equal rights.
Of course. This is what Syrians want. And this is what we want, and this is what we have been working on to try to achieve. So we will see. On the short term, I think we'll start seeing where things might be going. We are still very optimistic. But of course, we have to be cautiously optimistic. But the main obstacle in the way of Syria reaching what it wants, the change that it wants, is already gone, which is represented by the Assad regime.
Now, reports yesterday from Damascus suggest that the government will be representative, it will be tolerant of religion, and a statement released by Tahrir al-Sham on social media says that there will be no interference with the right of women to dress as they want. Could you confirm all of that?
These are the messages that we've been hearing. And of course, the first major test to this was when they entered Aleppo. And unlike Idlib is probably less diverse than other parts of Syria. Of course, I'm talking here in terms of probably more of the religious background and the level of conservatism. But Aleppo is a lot more diverse. It has a very large Christian community. It has a very large Armenian community. Even the Sunnis in Aleppo, they range in terms of how religious they are. So once the groups went into Aleppo, I think that was the first test, and it sent positive messages. They didn't interfere with people's movement. They didn't force anybody to do anything. And from our contacts in Aleppo, they are saying they are actually being very polite, very helpful, and they also visited some of the religious figures there. And we saw this in the other cities as they advanced. And until now, that is not just the message that they're saying, but actually even in terms of the actions in some of the cities where there are large Alawite communities, for example, they remained in their homes and nobody is bothering them. So the idea is we're going to watch, we're going to see. Until now, the actions match the rhetoric.
So if I understand you correctly, there will be no requirement for women to wear the burqa or the hijab. They will be free to dress as they want, to wear what they want, to use makeup or cosmetics if they want, to keep their hair short or long or uncovered. They will be free to do what they want.
Until now, that's the case, and I think if there are any attempts to change that, I think we will see some resistance to implementing these kinds of actions. But we haven't seen anything yet. For now, we're looking at Damascus and Homs and Hama and Aleppo, and there haven't been any impositions of any of these rules.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Now, Bashar Assad is an Alawite and his community remains very loyal to him. How will they be treated by the new government? Can you give me an assurance that there will be no attempt at revenge or vengeance or punishment of them because he was an Alawite himself?
So there were most of the Alawite communities are based in the coastal area in Syria, in Latakia and Tartus. And once Bashar al-Assad left, actually we saw some celebrations there of his departure, and there have been some of the groups, some of the opposition has reached those areas, and there were actually talks with the communities, reassurances that nobody is going to be targeted. Anybody who is, who hasn't participated in killing other Syrians, they're going to be left alone. Nobody's going to be targeted based on their identity, on their religion, on their sect. And until now, we haven't seen any problems there. And like I said, there were celebrations even within the Alawite communities when Bashar al-Assad departed.
Now, we've seen the end of 54 years of rule by the Assad family. 24 years of rule under Bashar Assad, rule that was difficult, that was problematic, where there were a lot of human rights crimes committed against the Syrian people. Should the new government seek Bashar Assad's extradition from Russia to bring him to justice? Is that a top priority, or is that not a matter of concern at the moment?
I think that's something that some Syrians are already asking. There are frustrations that he was able to get away, but I do think that the priority right now is to ensure that the state doesn't collapse, because the way the previous regime left it was basically it's ready to collapse in terms of the economy, in terms of the different state institutions. So the priority right now is to provide services to the people. The priority is to provide assurances to the people that we are all Syrians there, that we are going to be working together to rebuild our country. And in terms of holding Bashar al-Assad accountable, we know that crimes against humanity and war crimes, these don't have a statute of limitation, and we can always do that. But today we have a country to repair, we have a country to rebuild, we have a country to go back to, actually.
Finally, what sort of relations would you like Syria to have, firstly with the West, secondly with Russia, and thirdly with your neighboring Gulf Arab states?
Of course, Syria is looking to become part of this international community, and to get out of this dark era where it was controlled and had bad relationships with various countries around the world, even with Russia. I think, this is, at the end of the day, we are going to be part of this international world, the international scene. So of course, the most important, I think, is that we start with the neighboring countries. A country like Turkey, with which we share the longest borders, being part of the Arab countries and the Arab community. This is very important for Syria to get back into and have good relations that are based on mutual respect for sovereignty. And, in terms of, we are looking, of course, these are things that we haven't gotten to yet, but I think these are very important. The kind of economic relations we will have with other countries, where we're not merely dependent, but, it's more of a two-way relationship, very cooperative and at peace. So with everybody.
What about two countries that were particularly close to the Assad government? I'm talking of Russia, I'm talking of Iran. What sort of relationship do you expect to have with them?
I think so these two might be a little different. I think Iran's involvement had caused some sensitivities in Syrian society, and also some of the behaviors of some of the Iranian-backed militias have created a strong sentiment against Iran over the last few years. But at the end of the day, Iran and the Iranian people are neighbors. They are part of this region, and regardless of who's ruling, we definitely have nothing against the Iranian people. I think if the even the Iranian government's way of behavior changes towards Syria, these are things that, of course, could be taken into consideration. We are not here to make enemies. And of course, it's not between countries, there isn't forgiving and forgetting, but it's all about how much respect there is in the relationships, respect for our sovereignty. And as long as those lines are kept, I think there is an opportunity to have just as much of a relationship with both those countries as any other country.
Finally, many important countries in the West consider Hayat Tahrir al-Sham a terrorist organization. Two in particular would be the United States and the United Kingdom, although members of the British cabinet are considering lifting the terrorist tag from HTS. How would the recognition of the West be to you? How important would it be that this tag is lifted?
I think what's more important, and actually HTS is designated at the UN level, so it's not just at the country levels. Now, I think what's more important for us as Syrians is to see the way they behave, how they are going to continue conducting the business in the next phase. in terms of the ability to lay the foundation for Syria to truly transition to the Syria that we want, to include all Syrians in all parts of the processes. You know, at the end of the day, any country puts designations or lift designations based on their own interests. But what's more important to us is the interest of the Syrian people.
Okay. I thank you very much indeed, Dima Moussa, for this interview and in particular for explaining to an Indian audience the character and nature of Tahrir al-Sham, as well as Mr. Mohammed Bashir, the new head of the transitional government, and the sort of government you hope. And the point I want to mention in particular is that you are fairly confident that the commitment that has been made that women will have a right to dress and appear and behave as they want will be observed and maintained. That would be very significant to the world outside. It would certainly be an indication of the true character of your government. Thank you very much for the time you've given me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.